local language service provider to Leeds, led us to kick off a knowledge transfer partnership project to deliver online interpreter training for, specifically at the start for the company's interpreters, but actually when we got into it as a university we decided it could be a much bigger and much more beneficial project than leaving something just for one company. So we decided to actually make this a larger project and develop a range of courses for public service interpreters. We, as a university, we've used virtual learning environments to support our talk courses, so blended learning for a while. Unfortunately, that's the wonderful Blackboard, which I'm not a fan of. And as such, our forays into purely online learning, they've been quite tentative at best. We've got a range of online courses now at Leeds Met, but it's still very much, let's try this out and see where it's going and see what best practice we can do. Fortunately, on the other side of things, on the interpreting content, we've been using liaison interpreting within our language courses for many, many years now. So we had the skills side of things, it was just working out whether we could transfer that into an online setting. Not much of a challenge, that was very easy to do. As Scarden and Whatner's cleverly titled paper suggests, teaching interpreting in cyberspace could be the answer to all our prayers. Most interpreting courses, language specific, so quite rare to find one in your language for your public service interpreter. You're now looking at high cost fees for a master's, 9-10 grand for your conference interpreting. And there's not been that much out there, apart from the DPSI, to train public service interpreters. And on the same side of the coin, interpreting is being delivered a lot more via cyberspace now, so remote interpreting, video interpreting, and telephone interpreting. So the main problem being is that interpreting and languages in general are obviously a skills-based and competence-based subject where you actually perform rather than reading and learning and absorbing the knowledge. So our challenge was how to develop a course online that supported such a practical skills-based subject. Scarden and Watten's paper, they actually describe how they developed an online course that's it's built on Fronter and it uses web conferencing, so tutor-led synchronous classroom in order to train their interpreters. And our original brief, which had been set by the company, was set slightly differently. It needed to be asynchronous, it needed to be student-led rather than tutor-led, because mainly because of financial considerations. So we had different challenges to come across. Just a very brief run through of what I'm going to talk about. We'll quickly have a look at what other people have done in the realm of digital training for interpreters, and I'll summarise the training needs of the industries we saw them, because I'm not entirely sure how many of you have good knowledge of public service interpreting. Then I'll demonstrate our model, the issues that we had to overcome and the key design points that we used, and then just give you a summary at the end. So, there is now a reasonable range of digital training for public service interpreters. When we started, the only things really available were the virtual conference interpreting classes, SkeetCrack, and the black box interpreting software. So the EU Director General for Interpretation would deliver seminars, web conferencing classes for conference interpreting courses, and do sort of an assessment and workshops via the internet for them. SkeetCrack, if you haven't heard of it, is a software program that's provided by the Directorate General for Interpretation that accesses the recorded speeches that multilingual.tv own. So it's the conference speeches, and some of them are realia, so they're real materials, some of them are produced specifically for this. It's mainly European languages, so I can't remember exactly how many languages there are, but a student can download this software. You have to have a university access, but a student can then download this software, access recordings in the languages that they speak, and practice both simultaneous and conference consecutive interpreting through this. You can then save those videos, send it to your tutor for feedback, and everything like that. So whilst it isn't perfect for public service interpreting, it's still a good tool for practicing simultaneous and consecutive interpreting itself. And black box interpreting software, I haven't had too much experience of, I just know about it, but it was developed by, I can't remember her first name, but Sandra, who did a project to teach interpreting, and it's like a digital language lab, so it's not online, but you can download it in the classroom. So that was what it was about before we really started our project. One that I'm really excited about and would love to be able to use, but as of yet they're not entirely sure what's going on with the funding, whether it's going to be possible for everybody else to use it, is the Ivy project, which is interpreting in virtual reality. And that's been run by the University of Surrey along with 4 or 5 other collaborative universities. And what they've done is they've created an environment in Second Life. Has everybody heard of Second Life? Yeah, so they've set that up. They've got areas where the student can go and read about the ethics and that kind of issues with interpreting, as well as actually having practice opportunities, so they can, they've got sort of little role plays set up with characters that the students can run. Recently, there's a lady who has taken several DPSIs and has then become a DPSI trainer, and she's set up DPSI online, and she runs her courses over Skype. So they run she's got course materials, handbook, and she runs either one-on-one or one-on-several courses with students. They're language specific, so she does it in specific languages, and I believe she engages other tutors to do that. A couple of universities have done DPSI via distance learning, where most of the text is done through a virtual learning environment of sorts, and then the students are required to go in for day sessions or a full week session, the practical side of the interpreting. And then London University over in Canada have recently launched, in fact I think it was launched this September, a 2-year master's where the first year is spent on community interpreter training, and that's done via distance learning. And then if you want to continue and do the conference interpreter training, you actually attend the university, so that's done face-to-face and in person. And London University do their online courses, online sort of sessions via Adobe Connect, and use little breakout rooms within that. So before we sort of set out on designing any training whatsoever, we did a training needs analysis. And one of the actual things that came up here that I haven't put on the slide is that when we were seeing sort of what the complaints and what the errors were that interpreters were making, language ability was very, very low down on the list of complaints. It was more about their professionalism, their timekeeping skills, their ability to deal with ethical issues, so standpoints, which is a whole range of skills that aren't actually language specific. They need to be transferable. So we sort of realised as soon as we were looking through this that yes, obviously language practice and language ability is important for interpreting, but it's not the only thing about interpreting. 2 languages, bilingualism doesn't make you a good interpreter. If you don't have the transfer competence and the ability to go between the 2 languages, fine, you're going to struggle to be an interpreter, but you also need, especially for public service interpreting, an awareness of the ephemeral issues surrounding it. The main problem that interpreting students had was finding training and assessment within their languages. The DPSI, run by the Chartered Institute of Linguists, is available in around 40, I think it might be a bit more than that now, I think they've added some languages, around 40 languages, but about 75% of those languages don't run every year, and you have to find a cohort of 3 or more students in order for them to run. And, well, 40 languages is something like 0.05% of all the living languages in the world, and if you're a Tagalog or Tamil speaker, you're going to struggle to find the DPSI as an assessment in your language. And the DPSI has been sort of the mainstay, the gold star standard of the industry for a long while now. The other problem that students found was that they couldn't access existing training opportunities because they might be free Friday afternoon one week, and then the next week they'd have a last-minute interpreting assignment. And obviously, when you're working and you're trying to get the money together, that's what takes priority over your study. And finally, this one isn't really such an e-learning one, but there was a lack of directed CPD courses for interpreters. So there was an entry-level qualification, and then there was a level 6 DPSI, and there wasn't really anything that continued through those qualifications or continued after them, which is how we came to developing our suite of courses. They are called the Professional Development Awards in Public Service Interpreting, and you have a leaflet in your delegate book that details the first two courses, which have been live for about a year now, although enrolments have been spreading by word of mouth rather than a concerted marketing effort, so they're not huge yet. The level 6 and level 7, we've just finished making them, and they come live from April. So we've developed a suite of 4 courses that lead on from the other, so introductory, then it builds, and then the final course is actually more of a research-orientated course. And we've delivered them via a Moodle platform, and we deliver them asynchronously, and also non-language specific, but we can discuss that slightly later on. We chose Moodle rather than Blackboard, which we use in-house, mainly because of the customizability that we can find with it compared to our experiences with Blackboard, and asynchronous rather than synchronous, to be as flexible as possible for the students that we're hoping to attract. One of the other reasons for using Moodle was because of the activities and the design that we were trying to put in. We found that Moodle was a lot more accessible for people who weren't so highly technical to do all the HTML and coding things that for the activities that we wanted to do. There are some things we haven't included and some things that we've struggled to overcome the challenges of how to replicate that online. Obviously, you go for the MA in Conference Interpreting at Leeds University, and you've got 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, doing your language practice and your language pairs, practicing interpreting and building up the simultaneous and consecutive skills. Replicating that online is difficult. If you had sort of all the language teachers, all the money in the world, and high-speed internet connections, and you could get whatever you wanted, I don't see any problem with doing it. But because of the brief we had and everything we have, that's why we decided essentially to make it non-language specific. We do include language practice. We just don't assess it from the tutor point of view. We use Articulate and Ski Correct, so they've got access to Ski Correct through the university. They can download the software and practice it. Unfortunately, it is limited to the languages that Ski Correct multilingual speeches store, but it's better than nothing. The other one that we use is Articulate, which is a recording software. It doesn't include video as well, which SkiCorrect does, but it's open source, and you can also have 2 tracks running at the same time, so they can have a source track. You can provide them with an MP3, or they can source it themselves, and then they can also record themselves, so they can do simultaneous at the same time, or they can do consecutive if you've given them a spaced MP3. The picture here is Web Swami, which if I had all the budget in the world, I would be including in both Moodle and Blackboard. It's produced by a company in Hong Kong. It is proprietary software, so it does come with a fee. But it's got several key things that I like. Couldn't find a picture of the actual interpreting. You can build consecutive interpreting exercises on this. Couldn't find a picture of that, and I don't have access to the thing to get one. But I also like they've got a tone and pitch graph at the bottom, so you can give them the ideal way that they should be sounding, or perhaps the ideal thing that should be said, and they can then compare it. I believe Tell Me More, who are demonstrating here at the moment as well, also include a pitch graph in their language lab. And the other thing about language assessment and practice online, obviously the languages that we're looking at for public service interpreting are things like Tagalog and Tamil and the minority spoken languages, so finding teachers and assessors within those languages is difficult. That's why the DBSI is only offered in 40 languages and only offered with regularity in a small percentage of them. So the plan that you could, the way, the mannerism to get around that, that I'd love to do, and it's going to be a work going forward, is linking with international universities, universities over in the Philippines who speak those languages, and then with some training could assess, and you could do that via the Moodle platform online, giving them access. So that's future plan and something in development, which is the way we go around it. Our other issue was synchronous versus asynchronous. In order to give them the language practice and talking to each other, you would want more synchronous activities, which can be, you can service them easily. You can Adobe Connect if you've got a licensed version. Moodle has various web conferencing modules within it. But we decided to go for asynchronous methods, so we've used the forums, we've used the lesson module, which I'll show you how we set that up a bit later, to do it, and then they get student support and feedback on that. This was mainly driven by flexibility and option, flexibility, so that the student can study it at midnight one day, or do it all on one weekend that they've got free, and I don't know how I get that back.
Does he just want to sleep?
Yeah. While that's coming back on, we are looking at... that's fine, I'll just talk. There's not much to see at the moment. While we're waiting for that to come back up, we are looking at including options within the course. So we're looking at having them come in for a day and doing workshops and everything. But when we're having students from sort of Birmingham and potentially internationally as well, we want to try and stay as open and flexible as possible. We're using digital media in place of live role plays, and I've actually found today really useful already, because there's several tools that have been suggested that I'm going to use and go back and integrate within our courses at the moment. So yeah, the next one I kind of need just to show you what the slide is. So, does anybody have any questions so far?
screen down. No, with the projector warming up. You're just watching this red line.
You can't have that in a real interpreting situation.
Yes.
So,
There you go. Watching this. Hopefully that'll be all right now. Sorry about that.
So this slide that's about to show up is student response and engagement, obviously, with asynchronous activities where a student doesn't have to be there all at one point. There's always the worry that the students won't engage and won't sort of interact with the materials. On Moodle there's a very strong activity log report, and you can't quite see the timings on this, but so the student has started here in about beginning of November, I think it was. And the first module she's done pretty much all on one day, so on a weekend, and spent a certain amount of time, a couple of weeks I think, doing the first module. She's then had Christmas break, done a little bit on the first module, but she's now well into the second module, doing that quite regularly. So this is over a period of 2 to 3 weeks, and then I haven't put the third module on there, but she's just started looking at stuff on the third module. We do find that with some students we've had to prompt them to complete the assessments. Assessments, we have a multiple choice question, and then we have 4 or 5 reflections. So our assessment is done via a CPD reflections type of thing rather than exams or essays. For the first 2 anyway, essays and a research dissertation for level 6 and level 7. So they have had to be prompted to complete some of the assessments, but generally engagement has been good. We've had students who've done the first level, the level 4, and then wanted to immediately start on the next level. So it's positive. We're still finding our feet with it at the moment, and we've had to change a few things, and we've got some amendments to make. But we're generally very happy with it, and response is quite good. So the key design points that we started as a student myself, and having been on the receiving end of some VLE-led courses, I struggled with sort of finding my way around some of the Blackpool courses and everything. So I was very keen that it would be well structured and quite clear to go through. So we've split everything into modules. Then we've used sort of the weekly setup, topic setup within Moodle to put it into units, and then we've used the lesson module within Moodle rather than putting the content directly onto the page so you go down this way. It's more they go into a lesson, go through the lesson, complete the lesson, and then come out. We've made it quite engaging aesthetically. So we've used, when we had the site developed, we had some boxes developed that clearly signposted the 6 or 7 different activities, including reading, exercise, search activities. I'll show you them in a moment. So it's colour-coded and they've got simple instruction. Our audience is likely to be non-English speaking natives. So we were quite clear with our titles. We chose a specific font. The rest of the site is all in Arial, but for our courses we chose Georgia, which is a serif font, but it's been designed specifically for online learning. Serif fonts are generally more difficult to read online than non-serif fonts, but a serif font engages. You actually have to read it, you can't skim read it. Well, that's the theory anyway, is that with a serif font you're actually reading what you're learning and therefore engaging more. So Georgia is a clear font, but it is serif, so you have to pay a little bit more attention to what you're reading, and there are bits of the course where it is text that they need to be reading. So it was just sort of an extra safety measure for us to ensure that students were engaging properly. And then one of the tools that we had them put into the Moodle was an online reflections workbook, which I'll show you the overlay in a moment, where you can you can make notes, so it comes down over what you're reading, you can put notes into that, you can answer the questions, and then you can also share these, so you can share the notes with your tutor, you can do groups and share them collaboratively between peers and students, so it's quite a nice tool to use. So this is the layout of how we've set it out. We've got the introduction section, and we've split it into units, and then each unit contains several lessons, so that they can clearly go through it. We've allowed them to see when they've completed each lesson, and then there's a useful resources section in every module, and an assessment section. These are the signpost boxes, so it's clearly colour-coded, and then simple instructions as to what they're supposed to be doing in each section, and this is how it manifests itself within a lesson. So they're quite clear that here they should be reading it. When they're supposed to type in exercises or do matching exercises, they'll have the green backdrop box. If it's something they're supposed to do outside of the Moodle environment, it's yellow, and this is consistent all through our courses. And then this is the reflections work. Unfortunately, when I tried to take the print screen off it, it wasn't working properly because mine actually has notes in it, so it's not a completely bug-free environment. But this generally works very well. You can highlight your notes, you can annotate them, you can ask questions. So they're able to highlight a section of note that they've put in, ask a question, and then share it with a group. So if you've got a group between tutor and student, the tutor then gets a notification that the student's asked a question and can then go back and answer it. So, just to summarise, and actually answer, I guess, the title of my presentation as to whether it's possible or impossible. We found it possible. I can completely concede that the high-level practice side of interpreting, so the conference interpreting courses, would be very difficult to replicate in an environment like this. But when we're looking at public service interpreting, we're looking at more the peripheral skills, the ethics, the professionalism skills, as well as the language-based skills. We've managed to develop a full course suite that teaches those skills, as well as giving them language practice. We also recommend that they do need to be practicing interpreters, so this is a CPD course rather than an academic university course, so they do need to be practicing at the same time, and we require references, and they have to reflect on things that they've done within their working lives. Creative use of the courses and designing the courses has made it possible for us, and supplemented by the practical experience of CPD. Are there any questions now? I'm quite happy to answer anything on Moodle or on our courses or whatever, if you have anything.
I heard that the lesson module from Moodle is likely to disappear. Do you know about that?
I haven't heard that. We build in, this is built in 1.9, so I haven't caught up in anything that's developing further on into 2.3. But the next, the Laura at university, she's on 2.3, so she might get to answer that. Anything else?
Any thoughts about making it into a MOOC? Or some
I
ideas
think-
we've been hearing about?
Yeah, potentially this could be one of the mocks.
Yeah.
Because we do they're obviously accredited courses, so that they come out with a qualification after this. But yeah, I don't see why any reason why they couldn't become, yeah, if they do something.
Right then, so thank you very much.
discussions evolved around those materials, and they were very practical. We had, per year, we used to run them for a couple of 5 fixed slots in the summer, 5 weeks, and we would have 200 students on them. That was 2005. 2011, we decided to roll this model out further and offer a pre-arrival course to all our international students coming to the University of Southampton. Now, we get about 4,000 new students every year coming in October. So what we did was we spam email. We threw away the idea of a fixed course, fixed slot, because that was a major problem for students because they're busy sorting out visas and this, that and the other. And we opened it from April, about the time they were applying, getting their offers, through to October. And we also took out the tutoring, because we had problems with the tutoring element, because students were simply asking the same questions over and over again. Major problem in the middle of the summer, there are very few spare tutors to tutor an online course. Everyone's involved in face-to-face teaching. So we took out the tutoring. So we put the materials in there. We decided to throw out the discussion forum because we didn't have a tutor. We used something called a social wall. I'm talking about it tomorrow at 2:30, the whole thing. So we used a social wall. And what we did was we spam emailed them through every couple of weeks. Any students went into the university system, found the students who are applying, spam emailed them, free course, find out what it's going to be like studying at the University of Southampton. And we gave them a generic login. We put the course out through Moodle. We created a plugin so that when the students used the same generic login, they got a little set up an account, set of questions. This allowed us, once they had their personal login, to track what they were doing. 2011, we ran it for the first time. We had 1,600 students did that. They created an account, responded to the invitation, created an account, did the course to varying amounts, because as you've talked about, individuals get different things out of courses. Last summer, we ran it, we had over 2,000 students do it, so we're getting better at it in those ways. But the social wall, what happened was, the students used the social wall, and probably none of you will turn up at my presentation tonight.
Took the breath.
Students used the social wall to exchange their email accounts, their QQ if they were Chinese, Facebook if they were UK or America-based. They exchanged and this was the hunch we had, they exchanged their contact details and they got in contact with each other outside the course. And the social wall was good for this. Ironically, then they started actually trying to use the social wall to discuss a bit. This was all without a tutor, but then no tutoring. So they started trying to discuss. At that point, we had to add a discussion forum, a run-of-the-mill academic, rather dry discussion forum, to allow the students to talk. And I don't know if any of you have visited the student room, which is a kind of web-based open thing. It began, I've been sort of looking at how it developed over the summer, and it pretty much models how the student room is. So the threads that students create are students from Uganda looking for other students from East Africa, or students wanting to share a house rather than live in halls, looking for other students to share a house. So really practical things. And they created their own threads and they went off and they discussed on their own. So completely without tutor. So that was our experience of an online course that involved a lot of students, but the satisfaction levels were quite high. We gave them a feedback form. We had about 8% of the 2,000 actually sent us feedback, and it was very good. I mean, they felt they got a lot out of it. And you can imagine the students in that situation. So a lot about confidence building, making contacts.
Shared interest is the key word. Shared interest.
So from their standpoint, they got a lot of interest in the course, and from our point of view, it was a successful course. But it didn't involve much tutoring. I can't really say hand on heart there was a lot of sort of co-constructing of knowledge in there, but there was a lot of exchange of information. So for me, that was a kind of Duke different online. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, and I'm looking for ways to actually, maybe next year, add tutoring with. We added links to Facebook accounts and so on, to actually add something that's a little bit teacher-led and maybe does develop some particular threads that students want to talk about in depth with a tutor, but I'm still figuring out how to do that. But that was our experience anyway. But I'm glad to hear what you're talking about, because I think that's the way we have to go.
Can I make a comment on what you said? That one of the challenges when you do things like this in the open is tracking what's happening. Because people exchange their email addresses, their Facebook accounts and whatever, and then the discussion moves elsewhere, and then you don't know it's happening. So how do you show that it's been a success, that the students have been in contact, that have been talking to each other? You've lost that information because it's just happening elsewhere. It's just an acknowledgement that it is happening, you know.
Yeah. Well, you can get it from the feedback form.
Yeah.
So,
But I think, you know, if you've got 8% of people who return the feedback form, I'm sure there's a hell of a lot of other stuff happening. You know, they've met on Skype, they've talked by email, and we don't get.
That's a big challenge,
It's a
really.
challenge.
And particularly for institutions, because
Yeah,
these
exactly.
are
Because you will have to then justify to the institution, I need to continue doing this course because it's been successful, and they'll say, well, where's the discussions, where's the, you know.
Okay, so we just move on to our, we probably move on to lunch, so.
Yeah, I suppose one of my key interests in this is actually related to the open access to research debate, and one of the things that's increasingly concerned me over the last couple of years is how restricted academic research is to the outside world. How in most things that we publish are behind paywalls. If you want to buy some of my work, if you remember the public, you have to pay $25 for a 15-page article. Please don't, and email me if you do want to read anything I've written. This is highly concerning me. The way the debate has sort of evolved in recent last few months has actually concerned me even more with a lot of it, this preference for gold open access, publisher pays. I don't think it's any good if people can't participate in the publishing of research. So it's no good just having people being able to read what other people have done if they can't afford or access to participate. And this links very much with the MOOC situation, is that you've got what access to research do these students have? Our regular students, as a member of staff or a student at a university, you'll get a library card, you'll have access to all the online journals and resources, the library. And I think one of the connections I want to make is that what are the students on these MOOCs actually getting? Are they able to access translation journals? Are they able to have access to the OU library, for example? So in that sense, although these are seen as democratic and participatory, those students do not have the same access to knowledge that regular students are face-to-face and otherwise registered students do. So I think that's an important link that's perhaps not being made as much as I would like.
It's one of the criticisms that has been made of these massive MOOCs. Is it like second best? Is it just for the unwashed masses? Somebody wrote the other day, is this just good enough for the unwashed masses who can't make it to Berkeley and Stanford and Harvard?
And of course, the risk with the X groups, where it's you get what I dish up to you, rather than the connected ones, where it's like you can all put something in, but obviously what can they put in? So there's lots of tensions there. Oh, right, Vicky has a question, comment?
Well, I wasn't. I was just going to come back to your definition of a MOOC. If it's about content, then what John was saying is absolutely right, access to research and knowledge and so on. But if the definition is about sharing and collective knowledge and individual gain, then the rest doesn't matter. It's actually enhanced learning rather than access to knowledge. So it comes back, I mean, you're absolutely right, of course, but if it's about what you can do together, then perhaps it doesn't matter quite as much.
The Open Lab, at the OU, you've got a great situation with the Open Lab because part of the policy of the OU is to use it as an experimental space. So obviously doing the MOOC series is in line with OU policy. Has there been any pressure put on you or any discussions about using it? I mean, it is a marketing tool for the OU courses. But has there been any direct link between OU selling courses and Open Lab and your work?
Not really. I mean, we just actually thought maybe this is a good opportunity to find out about this because maybe we are going to do translation studies at postgraduate level one day. You know, it was more for our own benefit. There's no course hooked onto it that we could have sent anybody to.
And in fact, when we started it, Future Learn hadn't even been announced. So we were just thinking, gosh, the OU's not doing anything about this MOOC situation. Let's do something
Let's
ourselves.
just
You know, obviously it was all cooking in the background.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm kind of interested what the relationship is between sort of the open education resources movement and open courses, because I'm not entirely clear that the content is as open as we might think OERs are. And actually, what you're reporting is a lot of people are using these courses more like they might use OERs, so they're picking and mixing.
Yes.
So what's the point of the course part?
Yeah.
So I suppose that's just something that I'm not sure you know what the answers are, but
OER has a sort of same restriction regarding access. It's no good, you know, the things in the handbox like a reading lists and things like that on certain topics. Well, if people can't access those reading lists, it's absolutely no use to them whatsoever.
I need more on the, you know, you can take that, you can do something with it, you can put it somewhere else and share it, you know, with the wider world. You know, is that something that institutions are going to be putting Creative Commons licenses in their course materials, which allow that kind of freedom of sharing, because that is at part of what OER is supposed to be about. But it's more like saying you can come into our space and use the material, but we can't necessarily.
When you do a MOOC, by definition, what you put up there has to be OER. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to put it up there.
Well, true.
You know, it has to be based on OER. I mean, we used an open translation manual, which is published as an open resource. We couldn't use an open translation book because then we would be breaking the law.
But anything you created yourself.
What we created, I think the whole course has got a CC BY license. But you know,
generally the case.
The resources we created, the recordings of the synchronous sessions, they were all out there for people to.
But it's not generally the case with ex-MOOCs. That's the point.
No,
that's my question. Is that?
Yeah.
We need to wrap it up.
Thank you. Thank you.